Hey everybody, welcome to a very special edition of BrainScratch Searchlight. As you can see, I'm not wearing a t-shirt. I've actually dressed up because I have some guests here. I wish it was a happier conversation, but these are serious conversations and of course the type of stuff that we do on this channel. We are doing a follow-up on the disappearance of David Gipson Smith, and we are very fortunate to have his parents speaking with us. So with all that being said, let's go to the view and meet Doug and Julie. Hi, Doug. Hi, Julie.
Hi, John. How are you?
Very good. And thank you guys so much for agreeing to do this. I also want to give a very quick shout out to your friend Lisa that is kind of quarterbacking a lot of efforts for you guys.
Yes, she is.
That's amazing when you have support like that. I've talked about that in videos that I've put out to help families of missing people, that it's always important that you have a quarterback if you can, you know, someone that's willing to kind of grind it out and help you guys. And of course, Julie, you've been doing your own quarterbacking a lot on this case. I know I've read several of your statements. We're going to get into some of the details of that as we go here. But before we start on all that, I really want to ask you, what was David like? Because there's something that is missing in the coverage I'm seeing about him. You know, we're getting this kind of pickup from when he was 28 years old and coming through a rehab program and kind of rebooting his life. But what was he like before that? What kind of things did he like?
Well, I think that first of all, his physical status is kind of imposing. He's a big boy. He's about 6'3" and a half or 6'4" and about 235. And in high school, he was part of a golf team that was ranked in the state of New Jersey, and so he was an athlete. From there, he moved on to Methodist University down in North Carolina, he played a little bit, but he was very interested in professional golf management and moving into the golf industry. And so that's kind of an important detail in about who he is. So he has a little bit more of a country club, if you will, kind of a background.
And that's where he wound up working, right? He got a job at a country club recently?
Yeah, he has gravitated towards the golf industry as far as his occupation and employment. Yeah. And so when the new year came around and the weather broke, he went back over to our local golf course, and he was working in golf course maintenance with them.
Excellent. Julie, what about for you? What can you tell me a bit about David?
He, from a little tyke, a little boy, he was a very quiet child. As a matter of fact, he didn't speak until he was about 3.
Oh, wow.
And then he decided that it was time and spoke in full sentences completely when he had something to say. Very quiet, very a
bit more
independent. Yes, introspective, very independent child. All through his young childhood, he wanted to do it on his own. He is funny. He has an incredible sense of humor.
Sarcastic.
A little bit sarcastic. We have 2 other boys, so there are 3 boys in the house and me. So you can imagine the nights sitting around and enjoying each other and the type of humor that we would share. But he's very independent and never asked for help, almost to a fault, I would say, which we find as a little bit of a difficulty for David through the years. You know, he just is going to do it by himself. He's going to figure it out by himself. And, that's how he's been. He also is someone who is a deep thinker. Mm-hmm. He one of the things, Doug is a minister in our local community. And David, one of the favorite things of David's to do was to have theological conversations with his dad at a level that I couldn't follow. Very deep thinker in a lot of ways and about a lot of things. I'm a history teacher, and the conversations that we would have from the time he was a little boy were very interesting as a small boy. One of my favorite stories about David, and I have a picture of him. One of his favorite stories was King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table. And he would dress up in his knight's, his suit of armor, and he would quote the code of chivalry, the code of conduct for knights around the house. And that was at 5 and 6. So that gives you a little bit of a perspective on his personality. He's a deep thinker, and he wanted to be like the knights of old, and honor and integrity and all those things. And he would often sign cards to me, "Your knight in shining armor." So that's from the time he was 5, and would still sign his cards that way, recently. So go ahead, Doug.
No, I was going to say, I think that he's proud. I think that he was a self-sufficient man. I think that he was reluctant to ask for help in certain circumstances. And so as far as a 28-year-old, I think that he was he was finding his way as a 28-year-old man.
Yeah. And I have to say, I've got family members that are young, and it's very tough. It's a very hard time to be young. There's a lot of people that are staying living with their parents much longer. There's a lot of people that it's taking a lot more time for them to figure out what they're going to do with their life. And it seems like David was kind of in that same mold, right? He was figuring himself out.
Well, I think that, the phrase people use sometimes is failure to launch or something like that, around as far as prolonged adolescence surrounding, collegians and millennials. But I think that, there are times where David was doing very well in his early to mid 20s as far as being self-sustaining and a functioning adult on his own. Yeah. I think what prolonged that for him and what exacerbated that really was the struggle on occasion with these episodes of addiction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm sure you watched my previous video on it. I don't want to retread everything I said, but it is important to keep in mind that, like 1 in 10 people are dealing with addiction. So someone in your family is probably more than likely dealing with this. So to keep our hearts open to them is a very special thing. And let me just thank you guys for doing that. That's kind of one of the sweeter parts of a very dark story here, is to see that you were helping him and he was getting back on his feet. And then all of a sudden we had this kind of drastic turn that happened.
One of the things, John, about that is the understanding as moms and dads, deal with their sons and daughters, is that, we've come to understand that, relapse actually is part of the recovery process.
Absolutely.
And so while that's a hard area for people who are dealing in the recovery process, that does seem to be certainly part of that.
Yeah, it's not a straight road.
No, it isn't a straight road.
He had a good. He has been at our house the last 9 months and had been in a rehab leading up to him coming home, and he's been clean a year. So this a little bit more than a year. So some of this description of him as a current addict is very hard to stomach because he was so proud of, being over a year clean. And, I know that if he's hearing this, that's very painful for him because he worked very, very hard for that year.
And on the flip side of that, if he is hearing this, David, just so that you hear it from your parents, if you did fall off the wagon, if you are struggling again, they're there for you. I mean, I can see it in their eyes. I can see it in your guys' faces. If there was something that you could say to him right now out there, what would that be?
Come home.
Well, I think, yes, come home. But I think just connect with us immediately to let us know that you're okay, first and foremost. And I think that, your general well-being is our initial response, and that you're safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so you guys did see the previous video. Are there any corrections that we need to address from the previous video on this, or did I get everything pretty close?
First of all, John, let me just tell you that I never even knew a space like this existed on the web, right, for these situations. And so that was a little bit surprising when the video link popped up on our information.
Yeah.
So I thought that you navigated the story as best as we could tell at this point with a great deal of sensitivity. And as well with a great deal of generosity, especially since we had never met previously. And so taking into account some of the circumstances, we were very appreciative of that.
Excellent.
We've gotten nothing but I don't know how to say this to you. People are very pleased with how you've represented this case. And a lot of compliments on, as Doug said, us not being aware of anything like this. We've gotten a great deal of compliments on what you are doing, but most importantly, the objectivity of your work. And there are, it's hard to hear some of the things that are being said about David. Yeah. And it's we appreciate the objectivity of how you've presented this case.
I really appreciate hearing that. Thank you. I really I work very hard to try to do that, so I do appreciate that feedback. But in terms of the facts that were presented,
yes,
anything to clean up, or was it pretty straight?
No, I thought it was pretty straight. I mean, there are obvious questions that are that probably we've been navigating and trying to navigate in addition to some of the factual things that you're trying to work your way through as well,
right.
That seem to be still outstanding that we just can't seem to reconcile.
Okay.
One of I will mention, you happen to be one of the few that caught my response to the second news release from the police department. We think that that came completely from the witness, as they're calling one of the women, which I object to. But it was told completely from her perspective, and you caught me at a bad moment. But the truth is that entire news release was not true. And so it was very difficult to hear or to get that release. And what happened is I'll let Doug talk if you want to. Doug had called to tell them.
There was a timeline sequence, John, that happened around that news release. And so, and what's important for you to understand is that, our community is not a large community. There are only about 64,000 people inside of Salem County. Yeah. And I think that Sharptown Church, the church that I pastor, has a fairly large influence in the community just because of the number of people who are involved and the number of people who have relationships inside of the county. And so as a result of that, we've been surrounded by people who are former detectives and law enforcement and people of influence in the law enforcement community inside of our county. And so they've been trying to give us some counsel.
Okay, good.
As that pertains to Julie's situation, and what was released is that MSNBC had contacted us, and you have that. They did a Dateline NBC,
right.
Did a story, and I contacted Howard County
out of courtesy to the police department
to let them know that was going to be released.
Okay.
They had said to us they were going to refresh the case, and up to that point, they didn't put anything out publicly. And probably within 90 minutes of the Dateline MSNBC news story hitting, then they released that statement from the police, which Julie read and had a very initial knee-jerk response about that, which you captured. And then those who are around us said, don't do that publicly, email the people individually. So that got pulled down for that reason.
Gotcha. I was wondering even in the episode if it was retracted because I was seeing it reposted somewhere else. Yeah. But Julie, just realize we all know that you're a mother that's in pain, and, having information like that kind of come out. I had a strong reaction just when I read it. So please don't knock yourself too much for that. The social media space is its weird own thing. And, I don't know how big of a Facebook following either of you had before this, but all of a sudden people are paying attention to you. And I know through personal experience, I had to go through learning, what type of information to release and what to keep back. And no one blames you for those statements at all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I don't want it to be detrimental to the case. I think is my reaction is, we want to work together to find David. And my reaction happened sheerly out of what you're saying, a mom's response. Yeah. We do want to work with the police. I did send an apology. But we've not heard anything back from them.
Well, we want to keep the primary thing here, right? I mean, we want to find David.
Absolutely. I am glad to hear that because I know I just rewatched the video today and I saw that, I had made a special message to you, Julie, about that.
You did. I got it.
Yeah. I want to make sure because I've seen so many cases. You guys are going through a normal arc in a very bad situation, but typically a month or two after these cases start, all of a sudden you feel like all that help that was there for the first 30 days disappears and it gets emotional, but it is important to keep that team together.
I know you have a list of questions, John, but can I ask you a question that we're kind of navigating here? And that really is, I think that we're pressing into somewhere like 80 days, as far as David being gone and the sustainability of this, right? I mean, how do you continue to navigate the sustainability of something like this for a long period of time as it goes into 100 days or 125 days? And how, what things do you hold on to and how do you continue to do that? I mean, there's only so many times, I guess, probably it feels like anyhow, that you can refresh the case or that you can, you can repost something, at that point when there's not anything being heard.
Yeah. Basically, I know this sounds stupid to answer it this way, but it's the whole mentality of this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Okay.
So get yourselves used to taking regular steps, but not trying to do too much all at the same time. In particular, what you guys are doing here is exactly what I would expect for these steps. I took a look today, and quite honestly, there's been no major news hits on this story in about a month now.
No.
So, changing your venue, reaching out to other audiences, this, I think, is a natural progression. I know Lisa was talking about doing some type of event, some type of vigil event. That's why I made that video a couple of weeks back. That is really important because news crews will gravitate to events like that if you can get enough people together and you have a congregation. So I'm pretty sure that you're going to be able to do that. Like I mentioned in that video, keep keep those events tied to key indicators like either his birthday or the day that he actually went missing, and let the press know before those events happen and get them back out there. This is a game at this point of exposure. This is really getting David's face in front of as many people as possible and hoping that there's that chance that the right person catches that and goes, you know what, that looks like the guy that I saw. And then that's how these kind of things can unfold. It feels weird saying this to someone that is in your profession, Doug.
Go ahead.
But faith is a necessity in this.
Yeah.
Don't let the days add up and then start thinking, well, this has been too long for him to be in some sustainable situation out there. We have seen things with certain cases that defy logic. And I think we're already firmly in an area where the logic is not holding up on this case.
Yeah, that's true.
So trying to say that we can assume a bad conclusion or the worst conclusion in this at this point, it's not quite valid because we really don't know. Anything could have happened at this point. I know people are talking about the potential that maybe he left of his own accord. Maybe he had arranged for some people to take him somewhere. I know he might have talked about wanting to go to California or Florida. Those things are all still in play. We have nothing to rule those out.
Yeah.
Now, through the line of questioning that we're going to go through here today, I think it's going to be very clear that I personally feel like the story we're being told doesn't hold up to much scrutiny at all, in particular about where he was last seen. So we'll drive towards that. But to really answer your question, keep the faith. Don't burn yourselves out. Realize that in a strange way, you are also a model for other families that are going through this. One of the things that really gets me about doing interviews like this is meeting people like you, because I see strength in you that normal people just don't seem to muster, Seeing you focus on this, Julie, like you have, reach out in the ways that you guys both have, is inspiring to people that are not necessarily in that situation and to other people that are just getting into that situation. So just know, from what I'm seeing, you guys are doing great. And I think just staying consistent, keeping that hope alive, keeping the faith together. And we need to find David and we need to bring him home one way or another. And we need to address the reality of what that is at that time. But to dwell on the darker aspects of that, that's going to work against your faith, you being able to muster that faith together. So try to not go down. I know it's terribly hard. I know there's some days where you're not going to feel that strength. See if you can take some time for yourselves on those days. Enjoy your families. How old are his brothers?
31 and 25.
So that's really tough, man. I mean, they are close in age.
Yeah.
And probably wondering what the heck is happening with their brother.
Yes.
That's really true.
Yeah, that's really, really hard. I didn't realize that they were so close.
But thank you, John. I mean, that's solid counsel with regards to the if left unchecked, certainly your mind, I think, slips more towards the darker dynamics of what's happening.
Yes.
Just because it's so wildly out of character for David.
Yes. Absolutely.
To not be in touch.
Right.
Yeah.
And for you, Doug, don't forget, I know that you're a leader in the community where you are, but leaders sometimes need counsel too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Reach out to your support system and make sure that you let them know when you need them.
Appreciate it.
You got it. So when was the last time that each of you actually had contact with David?
I think that my connection with David on the 5th of August was when he left the house. There were 3 text messages that were sent to David, and he responded to 2. And then the 3rd, we didn't hear anything back from.
Now, he left on Saturday the 5th, is that right?
Saturday, August 5th at 8:30 in the morning, he left our home.
Okay.
We had a long conversation together, and that was the last time that we actually spoke with David.
And you were both there?
We were
Yes.
together,
Okay.
yeah.
And did you know where he was going? I've heard some things that maybe he wasn't being upfront about where he was going.
Yes. So, John, prior to David's disappearance, our conversation was surrounding, he had just acquired a car. He'd paid cash for an automobile and was very proud of that. And the next step really was finding a place for David to go ahead and, as a 28-year-old man, to kind of transition out of our home into a place of his own. And so we were working towards that. Had the opportunity to talk with him. He had had a recent relapse on the 31st of July. And so we were saying, we thought probably you might need some support in the midst of all of this. Mm-hmm. He said that he had a friend that was part of a program that he was going to move in with, is what he told us. Okay. And so on the 31st, on the 5th, we thought that he was going to be transitioning out of our home to be with a friend, and he went to Maryland instead.
Now, to just understand this a little bit better, this conversation that you're having with him about this, is it contentious at all, or are you all on the same page?
Go ahead.
It was not contentious at all. We didn't agree about what we thought he needed to be doing versus what he thought he wanted to do.
Okay.
He was ready to move in with someone, handle this on his own, go to meetings, mm-hmm. Be with someone who had experienced some of the same struggles that he had
with alcohol addiction.
Right.
And so that seemed like an acceptable choice for him to make. We knew the person, although we had not spoken to him directly. We knew the person. We had also given David, talk to him about, going into an intensive outpatient program or even back into a rehab program. Mm-hmm. Was he, did he feel like this is what he needed to do? His response was, no, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. I think living with someone who is at the same place I am will help me.
And ultimately, he didn't want to lose his job. He had taken on some financial responsibilities. Right. Was now paying for his own insurance and for his own for the car he had paid cash for, and so had taken some financial steps and didn't want to lose his position.
Right. So, that he's going to this specific place, the girl's house?
No.
We thought that he was going to be moving in actually locally. in a local situation. Okay. He had told us, so it's in August. His job was seasonal until about the mid-November, and he was going to go ahead and to move locally, continue to maintain the job, and then to continue to build a support network for him as he was dealing inside of areas of his life. Okay.
So when he walked out the door, he had packed just a couple of small suitcases.
Yeah. With the arrangement that he was going to be returning to our home as well to see our family, to have dinners, to do his laundry, that sort of thing. Yeah. But was going to go ahead and as a 28-year-old, kind of go ahead and to try to navigate this.
Start venturing back out
by himself.
Yes.
Standing on his own 2 feet.
Yeah.
And so we were supportive of that. The conversation surrounding this was not contentious. It was more of just an adult conversation. Mm-hmm. I think that he was trying to find his way in that situation. And so when we discovered phone records that the phone had went silent on the 6th of August, and then we tracked records about where he was. It was a surprise to us that he was in Maryland, John.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to kind of clear that up. So interesting.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So he didn't have a specific motivation about moving to Maryland in particular. He was just looking to move out, stay local.
He did eventually want to, he loved the Annapolis area.
Okay.
And somewhere down the line, when he was stable and ready, he had spoken about someday, moving to the Annapolis area. But that was far down the road. That was not something that would have happened immediately.
Let me pause and see if I can add a statement of clarity.
Yeah.
So David left on the 5th. On the 8th of August, I went to his place of employment because it would have been the 15th of August after we had been out there, just to tell the guys what happened to David. They thought, John, that he was just going to be gone for the weekend, and he told them that he was going to be gone for the weekend and that he was going to be returning on that Tuesday.
Which was the 8th.
And so he had mentioned something to them about being gone for a couple of days, but they said to me that David gave every indication he had full intention to be gone for a couple of days and to return.
Okay.
Does that add clarity at all to that?
Yeah. But what I'm starting to wonder, what I'm starting to feel in this situation is the relapse that he went through, that he started at the end of July, is that really concluded or not? Or did he get a week later and he's starting to put together a mechanism for potentially going back and using more alcohol or something along those lines?
That certainly is a question that probably would be that's a valid question.
Yeah, and it's just because I was a kid once. I didn't tell my parents quite everything that I was doing. Yeah. I understand, but in particular, when you have a secret like that, sometimes the stories that your parents are hearing are getting bigger and bigger and kind of further from the truth. And what we have here is, hey, Mom, I'm going to be local. I'll be nearby. Yeah. And he's driving a couple hours off to a different state.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He did know, we knew of the first person from Catonsville.
Yeah.
He had met her previously. And I had heard him through the last year speak with her occasionally on the phone. Mm-hmm. So her name was known to us.
Okay, we'll refer to her as Catonsville yes. person for this conversation.
That's fine.
Okay.
So go. You had I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say. So it wasn't too shocking to me after we calmed down that he wasn't in our area to know that he went to someone that he did know, and the reason. Only he can answer.
Did
you get the sense that there was any romantic thing there, or
no?
Let me back up and say that the details and the facts surrounding what they said that David told them don't match the details about the facts that he told us, and so it may be likely that David told them something different just so that he would have the ability to go and to see them or to kind of hang out. I'm not sure about that, but they were under the impression that David had been using heroin.
Okay.
But I just want to say and try to clear that up factually, that we're very convinced that just wasn't the case here inside of our home.
Did he have any history prior to living with you guys for heroin use?
He had some years ago.
Did that seem to coincide with I know he had a few small charges having to do with, it looked like small thefts.
It was theft for money
while he was
living in Florida.
Okay.
And was living in a halfway house. And I'm assuming that's why this theft happened. I don't know if it was heroin. It could have been alcohol.
Okay.
He is the alcohol portion of his addiction is pretty great. Yeah. Significant, yes.
Okay. All right. I want to jump ahead just a little bit because this question is just burning in my mind. Do we have any information that actually supports him being at the 2000 Woodbine Road location?
We have been waiting for many, many days for the report back from the police to determine whether David's fingerprints or any DNA was on that property. The initial search, and I want to be careful about how I say this because the initial search happened on the 12th of August. And that's when the helicopters came, the divers came, the sonar sub, all within a 4-hour amount of time, all happened on that first day. Unfortunately, the evidence, pieces of evidence, were not taken from the property.
Okay.
And when I say piece of evidence, bottles.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about, the bottles.
Fresh alcohol bottles.
Okay.
And they were not removed from the property that day, so a mistake happened.
Gotcha. And
by the time they went back to get them, it was 4 or 5 days later.
17th.
The 17th. We still have not gotten back the report from those tests.
So, John, to answer your question, no. There's no evidence that we're aware of, except for the eyewitness account at that point, that would place David on the property.
Have they looked at his cell phone ping records in terms of triangulating those? Do they get close to the property at all?
No.
The last ping is at woman number 2's house in Ellicott City.
Yeah.
That was the last ping.
And that's at 410, right?
Yeah, that was yes. Somewhere between at 410 was the last phone call that was 2 minutes long.
Right. With
the woman at Ellicott City.
Yeah.
And then Doug called or texted at 7:55 that morning, and it was dead. So somewhere between 4:10 a.m. and 7:55 a.m., his phone was no longer on.
But they have him at her house making a phone call to her.
Yes,
they do. It really gets there are some questions surrounding that, and so
I have theories about that.
Yeah, I mean, my off the top of my head, I'm saying she's not there. Like maybe she went on a run to pick up something or something. Something's wrong there. I hope the police are pulling her ping records as well and looking at where she was.
Do that, but I don't know. I still, as of September 19th, the last conversation we had with them, they still were not clear as to whether or not they had done a dump on their phone, I guess is what it's called.
Yeah, they absolutely need to do that, not just to figure out what happened during that phone call, where was she, where was he, but her story is that she drove him to that spot on Woodbine Road.
Yeah,
correct.
Which you can support if all of a sudden we see, her cell phone traveled in that direction and wound up in that area.
Correct.
Okay.
But we still have not.
But there is not any factual evidence surrounding that.
And there was nothing else found in terms of his items, jacket, shoes, nothing at that location.
No.
Well, I think that on the 17th of August, we drove out in the late afternoon, and so we met law enforcement just off of the property to get a brief of what happened. Mm-hmm. They said that there was no sign of any of the things that they had thought that David would have with them, and that the only thing that they could actually point to potentially was that a cadaver dog paused to sniff a pile of feces that very well may have been human, or it might have been, deer or wildlife related.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the reality is they still have not proven in any way that he was actually on the property.
Right.
Now, on the 12th, woman number 2 who met us at the property and whose family owned the property, her story was different to me. What she told me was different than what she told the police on several facts. And so that's one very frustrating thing for us. The stories didn't match up.
Well, and even the story that is known in the media doesn't hold a lot of logic. I mean, she goes back several days later to take him supplies. There's no water, no food. It just doesn't hold up. I know this is kind of a weird question, but have you guys found his toiletries?
Yeah, all of his toiletries are in the trunk of the car.
Now that is extremely interesting to me.
I don't think so.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. The toiletry he carried with him. He kept them in his room, and he carried them in a container that would go down to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so when he packed the trunk, 2 small suitcases, some boxes they kept his shoes in, and he just took his toiletries tray and he set it in the trunk of the car. It's still there.
I didn't know that. I never, and the reason I'm surprised is because I couldn't go near the car.
She's never looked in the trunk of the car.
I've never looked in the car at all.
But when they came
to
to search the car, and when they went ahead and detailed the car, the New Jersey State Police, they swept all of that, and all of his toiletries are still in the trunk.
Okay.
But what are missing are his wallet, his cell phone. He had prescriptions of medications that were not there.
Where did he keep those?
Well, he kept them in a plastic tray, that he would take them daily. And so when he was packing to leave, we gave him the plastic tray of prescriptions, and then any additional parts of the prescription at that point. And he put them, I guess, in a string shoulder bag.
Cinch bag, a gym bag.
One of those Nike cinch bags.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was the bag found?
No. The bag was not found.
No.
So the bag's missing, his medications are missing, but his
wallet.
His wallet, his phone.
His cell phone.
Do you know why we don't have a good clothing description on him, considering that he saw these 2 ladies at some point and no one can tell us what he was wearing?
I do not know why they have. If the police have asked for a description, they have not released it. On my personal Facebook page, I have a woman who told me that on the 7th or 8th of August, her husband saw a young man fitting David's description walking down Woodbine Road.
Yeah.
And it was noticeable because that road is not, people don't walk down that road. There's no shoulder,
right,
and so forth. And her husband described David in the clothing that he left from the house. that he was wearing from the house. It was, and the man's description, the jeans and a lightweight jacket that had a hood on it, but it's very lightweight material, and a T-shirt. And that's what he left the house in.
What color was the jacket?
It was a light gray.
Light gray jacket. Okay.
And dark jeans. Yes.
Got it.
So, but he said that he called dispatch and left a message, but was never called back. No one ever called him back.
Okay.
So that's why the police don't have a description of his clothing.
At least we're aware of.
That we're aware
Gotcha.
of.
I mean, at a minimum, look, I want to talk to girl 2 and say, what was he wearing when you drove him out to this location? Or what was he wearing at your house?
We just said this last night, that there, had we been thinking properly, there's a whole list of questions we, should have asked, and it's always that you should have known to ask, that. And there are several of those questions that we just mentioned, we wished we would have asked then, but we didn't.
Here's one of the highlights, I think, about that for me is that, given David's background, given what his tendencies are as far as involvement and what he likes to do, John, I don't know that David's ever camped out overnight anywhere at any time for any length of time.
Very interesting.
At all. He is not, like an outdoorsman. He is not a hunter.
Right.
He is not, as a matter of fact, those type of things, although they have some interest for him, they're not things that he gravitates towards in any capacity. And so, when you talk a little bit about his background and what his occupations, this was not, characteristic of David. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
There's also a story out there that he said that he just wanted to go out to be by himself, to kind of detox and be alone. And what was said to us was said to me by Ellicott City woman was that she said, "This is where I like to come and be alone when I feel like I need to detox." So I don't know if the story got twisted or if she didn't say the same thing to the police as she did to me. But she clearly had said to me that that's where she liked to go when she needed her own time.
Well, I got to tell you guys, if I'm going somewhere to do whatever, to detox, to hang out in the woods, to camp, I'm taking my car.
Exactly.
And that's the biggest problem. Yeah. I mean, why? First of all, even if I'm not taking my car for some reason, which I can't really imagine, am I really going to leave my car keys with this girl that I just met that weekend that I had talked to once before?
And if you add the circumstance surrounding that the car was probably less than 40 days old for David. I mean,
right.
It was like a new toy.
Trust me when I tell you that, he took very good care of that, and in the short time that that he was in possession of it, and that he wasn't going to go. That was astounding to us as well.
Yeah,
I can't in my wildest dreams imagine that he would leave his car keys with her, and we have a tracker on the phone on the car. Mm-hmm. Well, it's an insurance tracker. It is not a GPS tracker.
Yeah.
So it doesn't tell us where he goes. But on multiple occasions, the car was driven during the time that he's been missing.
It's for insurance purposes. They give it to you. You plug it in your automobile, and it tells when the car is turned on and when the car is turned off.
Right.
And then it tells you if it was driven haphazardly in any capacity.
Okay.
And so as a result of that, we have the ability to determine when the car was turned on and when the car was turned off, and
how far it went.
And how far it went. But
do you know about how much it traveled without him? How far?
Yeah.
Short distances.
Okay. But someone was using it.
Yes.
Someone was using his car.
Between August the 5th
and August the 12th.
I think the car was driven like maybe 7.5 miles, maybe 8 miles.
It's still pretty considerable, considering it's not the person's car who I think has the keys.
Yes.
Correct.
And knowing that David had just recently gotten it, he put all his money into this thing to buy this car outright. It seems out of character for you.
Very out of character.
Really out of character.
Yeah.
And not to go ahead and to be particular as far as the money, but all of his money wasn't in the car. He had a bank account.
Oh, yes.
That he was able to access. Right. And that's also a mystery. I mean, if he was wanting to go ahead and to disappear,
right,
all he had to do was drive to the bank on Saturday morning and grab the money out of his account.
Right.
It not touched.
And I know I mentioned this in the previous video, but that's part of where I struggle with the mentality that he ran off to go do drugs or party himself out.
Agreed.
He would have tapped into that for sure.
Absolutely.
So just to give kind of a recap on where my brain is with this, we have girl number 2 that we know was with him on that day, that we know he called at 4:00 in that morning. That's giving us the story about him being on Woodbine, but we can't support any of that. That has his car keys, that we now learn his car was being used after he went missing.
Yes.
Have they searched her home?
They have been inside her home, but they have not done a forensic search of her home.
Okay.
And their reasoning was
probable cause.
That they don't have probable cause.
I get it, but I struggle with it just because, if nothing else, his car is being used without his permission.
Correct.
We know things are missing from his car at least. We can't say that he's the one that necessarily took his medication out of his car. Police had also mentioned some small items that were taken out of his car that they thought were personal in nature, smaller personal items.
The two things that they can point to, but we don't know what was inside of them, John, was the Nike cinch bag. The cinch bag.
Okay.
And then also Julie had given to David a small tote.
It was like a very small gym bag.
Yeah.
That I did not know he had with him, but they said that the two things he took out of the car was the cinch bag and this little gym bag, tiny gym bag that would maybe hold one set of clothing. Maybe.
How'd they determine that? How'd they even know about the bag?
It would have had to have been the women.
It was what they would go ahead and say was an eyewitness account.
Gotcha.
But neither one was in the trunk of the car.
Okay. So when you guys got to the car, I assume it was operational, and we now know that it was being driven around, so it was working.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when the patrol officers arrived on the 12th of August, one of the things that they did was they deployed a patrol officer to each one of these women's home,
okay,
one in Catonsville and one in Ellicott City. Mm-hmm. And knowing that the girl in Ellicott City had David's car keys, the patrol officer actually asked her, as per our request, because we didn't know what we were going to do with the car at that time,
right,
to take the keys and to put them in the trunk. Now, I suspect that one of the reasons is that they wanted her to open the trunk to see what was inside the trunk.
Okay.
And so when they did that, then they asked me where should she put the keys, and I said just put them in the trunk, because I actually had taken an extra set of keys with me. Mm-hmm. because just in case, because they told us that the car was sitting in front of her house. Right. We weren't sure what was going to happen about the car. So I grabbed.
We assumed that his keys would have been with him.
With him, right.
Yeah, I think that would have been a good assumption.
Yeah, and we weren't quite sure what to do. We didn't know where he was. We didn't know what we were going to do with the car.
Okay.
That was another. I was very surprised that the police officers on the 12th told us, and I'm going to quote what he said, which is, "You don't want to leave any evidence in front of a suspect's house. Take the car home with you."
Right.
So there's been some discrepancy about why we brought the car home. We brought the car home on the instruction of the police department, which, it turned out later to be a huge mistake, but it was not our mistake. We were following the directions of, we were very pleased with the search that happened on the 12th, but we were just following, what we had been told.
Yeah.
And, so that's what we did.
And it was a new investigator that got upset about the car being moved, right?
It was the detective. Yes.
When they handed it off from the Howard County Patrol to the Howard County detective, that's where I think that they were a little bit. They struggled with the fact that the car had been removed from the property,
and that the bottles hadn't been processed.
But to answer your question, open the trunk, grab the extra keys, open the car. The car started right up. And it had been filled with gas. Apparently, there was still like 3/4 of a tank of gas in it.
Okay.
That area is only, maybe 75 miles from our home, and so so I drove the car home. It ran perfect.
Do you know if girl number 2 has her own car?
She does, and her reason for using David's car, so she told the police. She did not offer that information up. They initially asked her if she'd driven the car, and she'd initially said no. But then it was determined that she, in fact, had, because they were able to present the tracker. Mm-hmm.
Or someone drove the car, John. I mean, right. So.
Right.
Well, but then she admitted to using the car to go buy cigarettes.
That's true.
And because she didn't have any gas in her car.
That's true.
Is what she said. Now, the time that the car was used was between 1, 2, 3, and 4 o'clock in the morning. So there's
yeah.
Wow.
That's sketchy.
So I don't know how what it is buying cigarettes at 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, but in fact that's what she told the officers, and she told them she used it because she didn't have any gas in her car.
Does she have any criminal history?
Yes, it's public record.
Okay.
I'll just suggest to you, it is public record, and there's a significant yes,
she has a record.
Yes, she has.
Yeah. We haven't given out her name, so no one has any way to look that up. So, but she does have a record.
Pages of rap sheet on drug charges.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just curious if some of those charges seem like possibly distribution.
Yes.
Okay. They would just kind of, when you're talking to me about her using the car in the middle of the night like that, several short trips, I'm wondering, is she either picking something up or is she dropping something off? So that's kind of where I'm going with that.
Yes.
And I think that law enforcement would have the same conclusion, John.
Yeah. Okay. Just to touch on girl number 1, Catonsville. So you knew about her before?
We knew her.
We had not met her.
We knew her first name.
You knew her first name.
Knew her first name.
And we knew that David made her acquaintance in a previous rehab facility.
Okay.
And Yes.
There was some reason why he couldn't stay with her.
Yes.
Is that where it said that he upset her family or something like that?
No. She was going to a concert.
Okay.
And David didn't buy a ticket to the concert. My understanding is she lives with her mother, and so she didn't necessarily want David staying alone in her house with her mother. Okay. I don't know. That's my summation. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Got it.
So she had said to us that she had told him it would be okay for him to come out on a Sunday. He came out on a Saturday.
Okay.
She had scheduled plans on a Saturday evening. And so because of her lack of availability, I think that's where she had introduced David to her friend, who David had been in contact with on Facebook and by text message.
Okay.
But only since the end of July.
Okay. So we're talking once again about him being in that period of him potentially struggling with his addiction, and all of a sudden this is a friendship that strikes up kind of around that same time as well. And
on Facebook, he'd had one conversation with her on Facebook and several text messages.
Have you guys seen that conversation?
Yes, I hacked his Facebook.
Okay. And
I'm a mother.
Absolutely.
Your motherly trick. Yes, I've seen the conversation.
Did it give you any insight into why he might have been going to spend time with her?
None.
Okay.
No.
So at girl number 2's house, is that where her family gets upset and he needs to leave?
Yes.
Do we know why they got upset?
Well,
we don't. We don't know the real reason.
This is unverified at this point, but what was communicated to us on the 19th of September.
Okay.
When we sat down with the law enforcement, they seemed to indicate that there had been prior friendships with her that were cohabitational, that parents were unable to extricate the guy from their home, and they didn't want to have that possibility of happening again.
Okay.
Is that as clear as I can be about that without giving?
Yeah. I mean, in essence, they had trouble kicking out her boyfriends.
There you go.
Okay. So, when do the parents come to that determination? Is it Saturday night?
I think that one of my thoughts or theories is they didn't let him come to in the house Saturday night, and I'm not sure he didn't spend Saturday night in his car.
But factually, we don't know that. That's a hypothesis.
It is, and it's a very good one to bring up because of the info we have from the cell phone. Then that would make a little more sense if he's actually out in his car and he's calling into the house.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
but yeah, it is a hypothesis. Let's just put that out there. But
yes.
But we don't factually. We don't know. We don't know if he, how much time he spent in the house. We don't know if he spent the whole night in the house. We pretty suspicious of the fact that he was in his car somewhere in the middle of the night, though.
Okay.
I do know that if David felt uncomfortable, he would have left.
Yeah, and this is a man that has means, right? I mean, he could go get a hotel.
Or driven back home, or
yeah.
Yes, I don't. That's one of the very difficult questions that we don't have an answer to.
Okay, when you guys went to the Woodbine location and searched it for 45 minutes or something, right?
Walked around.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you notice if you had cell phone coverage out there?
Yes, we did.
Well, we can verify we had cell phone coverage because the girl that we were with I asked her to call the police from that property.
Okay.
Because it was not our property and we couldn't make the phone call ourselves. And so for them to be invited onto the property, I thought there was wisdom in having her make the phone call.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And she did. Okay. And so so we know that there was cell phone service.
Okay. So it is seeming more plausible that his phone was either shut off or something happened to it, and that's why it's been out of contact. Okay.
I do want to reiterate one thing that just really disturbed me about the police statement, the second police statement that was released. Mm-hmm. And they said that David would disappear for weeks or months at a time.
Right.
And that's probably what's made me most angry about that statement.
It's factually untrue.
That has never happened. The only time that we would be out of touch with David would be at a blackout period if he was going into a rehab.
But we would know where he was.
But we would be in touch with the rehab facility and know where he was.
Do you know why they made that assumption? What information they got?
It wasn't from us.
It wasn't from us. And my feeling is because it also followed this, they also used the statement that David had used heroin the day before, which we contest.
Yeah.
That information came from, we believe that information came from Ellicott City woman.
So you've had plenty of time. I assume that you guys have gone through probably whatever remaining stuff was at your home that belongs to him. Mm-hmm. Have you found anything in terms of paraphernalia for heroin use?
Nothing.
None.
Have you ever had any experience like with spoons disappearing or anything interesting like that might point to heroin use?
No. There was no paraphernalia in the midst of all of that. I mean, we were pretty vigilant with regards to checking his room to begin with.
Very vigilant.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we actually just had guests in our home a few weeks ago, and once again, a thorough cleaning of the room. There was not a shred of anything that was even remotely suspicious.
Okay, got it. I'm glad we were able to clear that up a bit. Has the uncle been questioned? The uncle that owned the property?
According to the Detective Tanis, the uncle was questioned and he is not a suspect.
Okay.
I asked that about whether the parents had been questioned as well, and he did not respond to me. I don't know if the parents have been questioned at all about why they didn't want him in their home, and so forth.
That's the toughest part for me in looking at this case is, our last place that we can verify that he was at. I mean, we have data that points to him being there.
Correct.
But we can't conclude that it has been searched properly or gone over forensically.
No, they not forensically. They did say that they walked through the house.
Yeah.
Police, and they were given access to walk through the house.
Right.
But that's as far as that went.
And that for me really doesn't really give us any information.
No, I have seen cases in particular where I just covered a case a couple of weeks ago where police went through a location 3 times and were pretty certain that there was a murder that had occurred in that location earlier that day, and they missed it. So, a forensic search is definitely much different than being allowed onto the premises to just look.
Correct. I have repeatedly asked why there has not been a forensic search of her car, of her home, and their response is that there's not enough evidence for probable cause. But that's confusing to me because it's the last place his phone pinged. She's the last person to have seen him or spoken to him.
We've caught her in a lie in terms of the car use.
Several lies.
Yeah.
In terms of even lies things that she told the police versus what she told us. Very different stories.
Yeah, I really feel like we are not being told the truth. And I'll just ask you guys, do you think that he was at the Woodbine location?
We don't, and the reason it's hard to answer is if they would just give us the information about the bottle,
right?
I would be able to say no.
So this, these areas of speculation for us are tough because on the one side of this, one of our close friends who's has been on site with us since this began to occur is a detective, and he's a good detective. He said, Doug, it just wouldn't make much sense if something did happen on that property that you would be taken back to that property.
Right.
And so that was kind of a wake up call for us, and then helped us to begin to think maybe differently about the situation. But at the same time, law enforcement seems to be very holding on to the eyewitness account of those who they've talked to. And so, but we don't have any, like you said previously, we don't have any verifiable evidence that David was on the property, aside from just the eyewitness statements.
Right. From here, I think we're talking about next steps, and I know you guys did a successful GoFundMe. You raised, I think, about $15,000 in a month, which is amazing. Let me just say before I kick it over to you for you guys to comment on that I really appreciate when people support causes like this. And personally, after I am done shooting this episode, on behalf of myself and my Patreon supporters and my PayPal supporters, we are going to make a donation to that cause too, even though it's already hit its threshold, because I know that there's a lot of expenses that can come up in these types of searches, and I want to make sure you guys have everything possible for finding David. So we'll be making a donation on this today as well. Is there anything that you want to say to people that have donated to that campaign?
John, we just want to go ahead and emphasize our gratitude. It's a humbling sort of experience to be, first of all, in a situation, in a circumstance like this, and then to have a community of people who rally around you that want to help in some way with the primary objective of finding David. And so even people who we do not know and have never met have contributed to that end. Our next steps are really focused primarily around investigating how to use that funding in order to find David. There have been conversations in the area of the legal arena. Just today, actually, I spoke to the FBI and had the opportunity to ask how could they be involved, and they said that their involvement is predicated upon being invited into the case. And so shot a note to the investigators and asked them would they do that. But I think that the primary focus continues to be that the funds are going to be used and targeted for the search for David, and our next steps are still being investigated.
To do everything we can to find David, every possible means.
Yeah.
So I've let Doug speak, but I do want to say that it's not gone unnoticed how grateful we are, and the things that people have said to us, the notes that they've written on the GoFundMe are so encouraging and so helpful. The days that become really difficult, you open up the GoFundMe and read these notes, and people are so generous and so kind. We're just so grateful for that.
Okay, well, I also wish you guys luck with the upcoming vigil, and please let Lisa know how much I appreciate her helping you guys with all this. Thank you so much for the time that you've shared with us here today. I truly, truly appreciate it. And if there's anything that you think I can do to help you guys out, please be sure to reach out and let me know. Well, Brain Scratchers, this is where I turn it over to you. And I'm just humbled that David's parents spent time with me on this channel. Lisa, the person that I mentioned a couple times, actually reached out to me. And then Doug actually reached out to me also over the weekend specifically to make this happen. These conversations are always tough, but like I mentioned in that chat, there is a sense of faith and hope that you have to maintain. And I think these conversations sometimes help that. I hope that they got that. I definitely got a good dose of that. Whenever I meet people in this situation, seeing their strength, I don't know, it just keeps pushing me and helping me with doing this show and doing this channel and, getting up every week to cover a different case and to try to help these families. It's because of people like this. So, and I can't do it without people like you. So I appreciate each and every one of you out there. Please share this video. Let's get this information out. Let's see if we can do something to help bring home David. And I will also have a link in the description box below to the GoFundMe if you feel compelled to donate to that. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you on the next episode tomorrow on the Lord and Arts channel.